What's up everyone, today I want to share some tips on how to survive at endgame in Diablo 4. With the release of Season 4 and the pit, we now have a place to really push ourselves and see how far we can go, really push our builds as far as we can. But as you start going further and further, and the monster levels rack up to like, what, 200? You start to need really high defensives and strategies. You know, you're a level 100 character, fighting things double your level. You really need a plan. You need a way to deal with that really high damage. So whether you're trying to push crazy high in the pit, or you're just leveling, trying to learn your build, or you're just struggling with nightmare dungeons, hopefully there's something in here that will help you stay alive, help you win, and help you get better at the build you're playing and the game in general. So let's get into it. Okay, now the first thing that you want to look at if you're getting one shot, if you're getting just destroyed in whatever content you're in, is your armor. So if you hover over your armor here, it has an armor cap. So it says here 9230 is the armor required for maximum reduction against level 100 enemies and beyond. We can't go past that. So if you're fighting level 150 enemies, you still are capped at that 9230. Okay, so why is armor so important? So you can see here, reduces physical damage taken from enemies of equal level by 39%. So I'm playing on this character right now, and that's a pretty bad armor rate. So there are two ways to increase your armor. Well, there's three technically. You can get some from, say, your paragon board, but the two that come from your armor look like this. You have the base stat on your armor, so you can see here, this has got 1619 armor, 1619 armor. That is a base, like, implicit amount. So every single piece of armor has an armor rating. Armor there, 400 armor there, 925 armor there. Every piece of armor has armor. That's generic. But then you can also have armor roll as an affix. So you can see here, we've got 1660 armor rolling as an affix on that piece of gear. So if we wanted to increase our armor, we could equip that piece of gear. And you see now it's 7,000. And instead of having, what was it, 39% armor, 39% damage resistance, we now have 60% damage resistance, which is huge. So that's a massive boost. The next way it can come is like this in a percent. So you see here 29.2% total armor increase. If you're really struggling, that is another way to gain a big boost on armor. So you can see if we put this on, we go from 5,000 to 7,000. If we put this on as well, we hit 9,400 and we hit the cap. And you can see now damage reduction of 85%, we are at the cap. We are just a bit over the cap. And that's like the perfect place to be. Obviously, these aren't perfect items for me to be wearing, but I'm just trying to show. We are now at the perfect armor rating pretty much, where we have all of the benefit and not much waste. And that's what I'll be trying to get to on every build. If you find yourself over the armor cap, say you're at 15,000, what I would be doing here is I'd be looking at your gear, looking where you have armor. So say you had this item with the armor on, I would now think about rolling that off at the occultist for something better. So like crit, attack speed, things like whatever comes on that piece of gear that benefits your build better, to try and bring it down to the 9,000. You can also pick up armor in the paragon board. So if we go on here and we filter by armor here, you can see there is a lot of armor things in the paragon board. And the problem with that is they are like 50, 100, 50, 50, 100. And I would say, unless you're going through that node for a reason, so say you're trying to get to the next board and it's on your way and you can hit a paragon node with armor and say something else like damage reduction there, it's worth getting on the way. But I wouldn't go out of your way to spend points on armor in the paragon board, purely because paragon points are very important and can give you massive damage boost to your build. And the other is it's such small amounts. You know, you would say you were to go up and get those three, you'd get 200 armor. You can get 2,000 from a piece of gear. So I wouldn't spend your paragon node points on armor. I would focus purely on gear to do that, to hit those caps. But yeah, once you hit that cap, you're going to feel a massive difference in how much damage you can take and how much of the one shot you really feel when you've got that damage reduction. Okay, the next thing to look at if you're struggling at endgame, you want to push further, is your resistances. This is the second thing I would be working on, and it is here. If you go on your profile, you click stats and materials, and resistances is like right here. This is what you want to get, and all of these have capped again, and the cap is 70%. So again, everything here, to where armor reduces physical damage taken, these resistances reduce your damage from the different elements. So this is fire damage and burning damage over time, lightning damage, cold damage, poison damage, and damage over time, shadow damage, and shadow over time. So all of these are very, very important. You're going to go into nightmare dungeons, you're going to go into the pit, and you're going to just land on a shadow puddle or a poison puddle, or something's going to hit you with a fireball, and you're just gonna dissolve. You're just gonna absolutely melt in seconds if these aren't topped up to 70%. So the best thing to do for this is to try and find things that up your defenses. I know that sounds stupid, but there are certain things that can up your defenses as a whole. One of the main areas is your neck. So if you go on most necks here, you see this like implicit value here, 25% resistance to all elements, just under where it says masterworking. This is on most necks, 25% resistance to all element. And that is crucial. Like you take that off and things start to drop below the cap. You put it back on and we're in a much healthier place. And if you go into your gear here, You can see here, look, 25% to all elements, 25% to all elements. Really, really strong. But some, if you go here, have an extra thing, resistance to all elements as an affix. So you don't just get the 25% to all elements, you get an extra 15. So that one neck alone gives what? 40% resistance. You're like halfway there. And it doesn't just need to be just some juiced neck. You can find resistances kind of all over. So if we look at these boots here, if you go down to the third affix, 10% resistance to all elements, a max roll on the boot. So there's another 10%. So you don't need some crazy juiced out neck. You've got a really good boost right there. On the rings as well, you can get certain elemental resistances. So you see that's got cold resistance. So if you were a little bit low, say you had everything topped and cold was a bit low, you get cold resistance there implicit on the ring, the second line, and you get another good boost. So, okay, so that's going to give you a good like base level of resistance. But unlike armor, I would be looking for this in your stats and paragon board as well. So in the skill tree, you can do a little search for resistances and maybe you've got something there, maybe you don't. But in your paragon board, you definitely will have something. So if you go again, you go here and you turn the resistance filter on, you can see all the things here that impact your resistances, and you can get a lot here. So for example, on Sorcerer, if we go to the very, very start, the very first like starter board, you've got here, increased resistance to all elements, increased resistance to all elements, resistance to all elements. And what you can do here is, if I take this glyph out, this is 1.5%, 6%, and 1.5%. If you put a glyph here, gives bonus to damage reduction modifiers. That's the elementalist. This goes up to 2.6, 2.6, 2.6. So you get a nice boost to all elements. That's like what, 7.5%, 17.5% resistance to all elements. With that and the armor we've talked about, we're pretty nearly at cap already. If you're struggling for a certain element, you can go to things like this. Fire resistance, fire resistance, fire resistance. So if you're really struggling as well, if you needed fire resistance really bad, so say you want that fire resistance and it's not enough, you can get glyphs like this one, grants bonus to all rare nodes within range. You'd put that in there, and then all of these, this rare node here would boost. So that's another way to boost it. But yeah, you can definitely get huge resistances on your paragon board to the point where you're gonna overcap, and then you can start to bring them down. So what I'm starting to do on this build is I've overcapped. You can look at your resistances, and if you start to overcap, so you can see here, you currently have 137% shadow resistance. So now I can start bringing it down and free up some points in my paragon board. Okay, the next thing to talk about is defenses and cooldowns. So as you start pushing like 80 plus in the pit, you're going to not needing to really use your defensives and use them well. If you look at, say, a sorcerer, we have flame shield and ice armor, which gives us a literal barrier. We get hit, we put another barrier on. We get hit, we put another barrier on. You kind of cycle between your barriers. And as long as you have the cooldown up, you get that back faster. So every class has a big defensive. Like Necromancer has their Blood Mist. As long as you're in your Blood Mist, you're invincible. You come out of it, you go back into it, you're invincible again. Warriors, they have their Shout, things like that. So everyone has some sort of defensive or some sort of like getaway that is really good for keeping them alive. And the key to staying alive at endgame at really high end is to have these up more often. And that comes down to your cooldown. So if we go into our stats and we go to cooldown, you can see here my cooldown reduction is right now at 33.7%. This amount is capped at 75%. Like that can be a lot higher. So that means that we get our skill back faster. So what you want to be doing is getting to a point where you get your abilities off cooldown as fast as possible. So I'm going to talk about Sorcerer as an example, but this works for if you're a Necromancer with Blood Mist, you've got Shouts, whatever you're using to stay alive, having that more often. So the first way is to get cooldown reduction. Okay, so if we're looking at cooldown reduction, we want to get that number as high as possible, and it comes from our gear really well. So if we search for, say, cooldown reduction in the stash, you can see here there's a focus, and this focus has implicit at the top, because it's a focus, 7% cooldown reduction. So if you were using a one-hander and a focus, you would have 7% extra cooldown reduction. You can find it on items as well as an affix. So you can see on this helmet here, the third affix down, 9.2% cooldown reduction. So trying to get cooldown reduction on your gear is really important. It's the one thing I'm trying to do now on my Sorcerer, is really up my cooldown reduction so I can have... There's even a build called Immortal something. They call it Immortal when they can have permanent uptime on their defensives. So getting your cooldowns up really helps with that. The second way to get your defensives better, if you don't have high cooldown reduction, is in your skill tree. So if you go in your skill tree and you go to your defensives, so I've taken some points out in this defensive here, Flame Shield, and you can see here we have a cooldown of 15 seconds. We engulf ourselves in flame for 2 seconds, and that's our shield. So we have 2 seconds of defense, and then it's gone. Now if we put points in, we are now up to 2.4 seconds of shield. If we go into our gear and we put the gear on that I have for defensive skills, so I've got a chest piece that gives +4 to all defensives, and then I've got the helmet Harlequin, which has cooldown reduction and has +4 to all ranks. We go in again, and we see now it's 3.72 seconds. So we've like doubled the time we have the shield up. So if we've got the shield up for 4 seconds, we're shortening the window between the skill, and we're lengthening how long the skill is up, meaning that we have a higher uptime of defensive in harder content. And that works with most skills in the game, which you need to use as your big defensive ability. But yeah, I'll jump on a different one and show you, but it doesn't matter what you're playing. It's the same, trying to keep your defensives up as long as possible. Like if you're a druid, you want to have your werebear up more often and have that immunity more often. Same on, say, the blood mist on the necromancer you see here. Although this doesn't extend the time, we can increase the cooldown by putting more points into it. So you see here, it's 19.8 seconds. We put some points in and we're down to 17. You get, say, +3 on gear, you get more. You say you get Harlequin's Crest, you get 4 more, and you keep pumping that up and then keep bringing your cooldown reduction up at the same time. Yeah, we sort of have this immortal build where we have this constant uptime or near perfect uptime on our defensives. And then the last thing to worry about really is your health. Don't forget about your health. So no matter how good your defensives are, if you say you're taking a hit and you take down that damage by as much as you want, say it's a physical attack and you take it down by 70% with good armor, and you 85% say you really reduce that hit, if you don't have the health pool to take the hit, you're gone. So try and get your health up as much as you can. Mine's pretty bad on my sorcerer right now. It's one thing I'm working on, but health can roll on a lot of items and you can get a greater affix of health on a lot of items. So definitely try that. If you look at an item with nothing, say there, that's got no health on it. If we were to go into here and we would just find something with health on, so there we've got 1,310 max life as an affix. That's huge. If you had that and then you put it on and then you hit it with masterworking as well, you up that all the way to 12 out of 12 masterworking, you have a massive boost to your health. Get that on multiple items and you're going to go far. There's a reason like Barbarian is such a tank right now. It's because its health can go so high. So yeah, don't neglect your health. Try and find a few greater affixes with health if you can. Obviously, there's more important things, you know, passives in your skill tree, attack speed, crit, things like that are going to be more important. But then as you're trying to find your BIS items, do try and make room for some health to really pump this up as high as possible, because, you know, the further you go, the more you're going to need. But that's it really. I think that they're the big things. Yeah, hopefully this helps if you're new to Diablo or you're new to the end game and you're just looking for some advice on how to survive a little bit better. Hopefully this has helped. There's a ton of other things to talk about. You know, there's niche specific things. There's like build specifics. There's certain cheese strategies and cheese builds. There's loads in Sorcerer that I know of that I've made in another video. But these are just some overall things that should help your survivability at end games. You're pushing that harder content. I will say some things can't be stopped. So if you're just trying to stand there like a tank and take all the hits, some things can't be just eaten. You know, if you're fighting like Uber Lilith, you have to dodge certain things. So certain mechanics in the game you just got to learn and you've got to get better at. But as you're progressing in the pit and say you're in like 60, 70 of the pit, you should be able to take hits from a lot of the things in there. You should be able to find a way to get to the boss fairly smoothly. You know, people farm the pit at like level 80. So you should be able to feel comfortable if you get your build right, and hopefully this does help with that. But that's it for this video. I make a ton of guides on Diablo, other MMOs and RPGs. So if you like this style of content, you found this useful, let me know down below. Subscribe to the channel. That's it from me. I'll stop rambling. Hope this has helped. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next one.